Hey folks, Tim with Old School Tips and Techniques. Just sitting here shooting a few blank bale targets, trying to keep up with the practice. Super excited about this week's video and next week's video because we're going to do this one in two parts. And we're going to go over probably the most talked about aspect of traditional and modern archery that's out there. And probably the biggest hurdle that most of us are going to have to cover at some point in our traditional journey. This week, and again part two, hopefully next week, is all about target panic. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, let's see where this one takes us. Thanks for checking in. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Here's our game plan for talking about what I consider the demon of target panic. I'm going to do this in two parts. First part is going to be getting into more of the physical aspect of target panic. What causes it? What causes it for new archers? Then I want to get into a little bit of a discussion about those of you who have been in traditional archery for quite some time and are dealing with trying to get out of the slump that you're in, or trying to fight the demons of target panic, whether it be short drawing, whether it be locking up, whether it be having a difficult time getting off the string. I mean, it's going to show its head in several different ways. So let's get started with the physical aspects of traditional archery, and then just to get you guys a little excited, because I'm very excited about this, part two is going to be the mental aspect and the difficulty that one runs into with target panic when trying to get on target. And for that, we're going to bring in somebody who is very near and dear to my heart, a guy who has done absolute wonders to promote traditional archery. We're hoping that we can bring John Word in and from Lancaster Archery and have him go over his thoughts on the mental aspect of target panic and what he has learned over the years and what he has learned working with some of the very best archers out there. Not as a coach, but bringing them in to do seminars on target panic, bringing them in to do seminars on how to shoot the bow better. So just I couldn't be happier from John giving me the okay that he'd come in and help do what we're doing here, which is trying to continue to grow traditional archery. So with that in mind, let's get started. Let me give you a little bit of an idea of my history with the bow. As we discussed before, I've been shooting these traditional bows for 30 years. And what you don't know is, if you look around my home, I've been very successful hunting, and I've been fortunate enough to live in an area that is loaded with whitetails. So I've killed quite a few whitetails in my life. I've shot black bears, I've shot mule deer, I've shot turkey with the bow, a mess of small game. But in my intro to my video with the Game of Thrones music and some of the pictures on the wall and some of the deer in back of me up here, I just want you to know that for the first 20 years of my involvement, it was a straight uphill climb. I loved it. I wanted it to work so bad, but I developed target panic, and I developed it early on. And trying to get over it, trying to cope over the years, and trying to put band-aids any possible way I can. Doing, blank bale work, using clickers, counting in my head. I tried everything. And there was a whole group of us that when we first got involved in archery, The big mistake we made was bow weight. You know, before I got involved in traditional archery, I was shooting a compound, 70-pound high country sniper, shooting it instinctively. So I didn't have the hurdle of learning how to shoot traditional. Shoot instinctively. I was already doing that with the compound and doing very well. So that wasn't the problem. The problem started when I bought my first bow. And like many of you who are looking for a new bow, or who many of you are looking back to when you bought your first one, I went too heavy. You know, I went right to a 60-pound bow. My first bow was a Jim Brackenberry recurve. And, you know, hell, I was shooting a 70-pound compound. I'll drop 10 pounds and be just fine. Wrong. Wrong. For the next 15, 20 years, it was terrible. And to make matters worse, the first 5 years, 10 years I progressed, I went up in weight. Sure, I could draw the bow back. I could let it go, but I couldn't shoot it consistently. And for that matter, I couldn't shoot it that well. But I just relied on getting very close to the deer. And with that, I was able to put quite a few deer on the ground, with an occasional blood trail that ran a lot longer than I wanted it to run. Some that just kept running on and on and on. So that was the frustrated part. What really bothered me through the whole process was the 3D shoots. I had went to the very first Baltimore Bowman shoot, being, you know, here on the East Coast. I had went to probably the first 15 Denton Hill shoots. And where I ran into a problem was I just wanted to go to an archery shoot and shoot one good arrow. And you laugh at that, but what I considered a good arrow was not to have a stutter, not to have a point during my shot process where I screwed up. You know, my definition, again, we're talking about the physical side of target panic. I'm not getting into the mental aspect, and I really do believe, you know, there's one side and the other side, and when they come together, it kind of creates a total mess. But from the physical aspect of traditional archery, my definition would be that somewhere in the shot process, from the start of the process to the end point, there's a disconnect. There's a short circuit somewhere in our brain that just goes haywire. And as I said, sometimes, you know, it starts early on with not being able to get to anchor point. Sometimes you can get to anchor point, but you get a case of the shakes, and your mind is saying, just let me go. I've seen other folks that the second they touch any part on their face, and you may have seen this at some of the archery shoots, the arrow's gone. So for those of you who are just getting started into archery, let's cover that base first. Let's talk about what you need to do in the selection of a bow early on. And I also want you to know that during the process, the learning process, somewhere along the line, I want you to understand that target panic may come into play and show its nasty little head in some shape or form. And then I want you just to be prepared for it. And I think for the most part, if you listen to me from how to get started, I think the aspect that you're going to run into with target panic, again, I wish everybody the best and that they don't get bit by the bug or, you know, have the little demon come into play. I think a lot of the people that do have it, if they go through the proper steps early on, are going to have more of the mental aspect of it. And John will be along to discuss that. But here's what we need to do. Let's just say we're a new guy, we're into traditional archery, we're shooting a compound, or we're not shooting any bow for that matter, and we want to choose a bow. I do not care whether it is a one-piece recurve, an ILF, a takedown, a longbow, a three-piece longbow, or a self-bow for that matter. What the most important thing to keep in mind is bow poundage. Okay, and I say that because of this. What we need to do, and we talked about this in the first video, is to develop a solid shot process. 5, 6 steps in a process that's going to take us so we know where to start and we know where to finish. Okay? And during that shot process, if we don't have complete control of the bow that we're shooting, we're not going to have complete control of the shot process. Okay, so right out of the gate, we're making a mistake. Okay, so here's what we want to do. We want to get a bow that when we draw back to our anchor point, when we begin our shot process, and again, whatever shot process is going to work for you, you guys can iron that out. But we want to be able to come into anchor, and we want to be able to almost hold a conversation. We want to be able to feel our anchor point, our bone-to-bone contact. We want to be able to feel if we're going to wrap that thumb lightly around that jawbone. We want to feel that. We want to feel if we're using a feather to the nose, or we're using the string to our eyebrow, or we're using a clicker. We want to be able to feel all that and not rush the shot. In other words, get back in there like this, have a cup of coffee, think about all you're supposed to do, and then shoot a perfect arrow. Without the ability to do that, without that kind of control, you're going to run into problems. Now, I can't tell you what weight that's going to be. What I can tell you is it should be probably in the 35 to 40 pound range, because that's going to give most people, if you've been shooting archery for years, pretty good control. I think the 35 pounds is going to work. If you haven't shot a bow, it might be 25 pounds. Okay, poundage is going to be so important that you're most likely going to end up spending some money, and maybe a month later spending a few more bucks to maybe just go up in 5 pounds. So if money's not that big of an object, you might want to lean towards an ILF, because you could get a set of 30-pound limbs, shoot them on the light setting, crank them up to 35 pounds, and maybe a month later get a new set of limbs at 35, shoot them at 35 or 40, crank them up. So that way you're kind of tiering. But that's going to probably give everybody the best chance to come into this and learn a very good, solid shot process. Shooting it with control from start to finish. So once we get that into play, you can start going through your blank bail and staying close for the first month or so. I think at that point you're going to be on your way to handling the physical problems that may arise. You're going to have that set pretty good. So new people that are just coming into the sport, people that are just going into traditional archery, that's going to be my advice. So grab something you control, go out there and have some fun. Let me take a quick break here, and then we want to get into part 2 of this video, which is going to discuss some of the problems that I ran into over the years and the way that I ended up coming to grips with it. So give me a second, we'll be right back. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the issues that I had, and this is going to lead into, for those of you out there who are dealing with these demons and having all kinds of issues getting through the shot process, whether it be hunting or whether it be at the local 3D shoot or whether it be in your backyard. In the pictures that you've seen in some of these videos and in the entry of the film, I'm not sure if any of you noticed, but half of those deer were shot left-handed. Half of the deer were shot right-handed. And the reason being is I dealt with really, really bad target panic for a lot of those years. And it got to the point where I had to make a decision. And my son even dealt with this early on. I want to say maybe when he was 13, 14 years old, something like that. We were up at Denton Hill shooting, and he just came unglued and just didn't have any interest in shooting the bow anymore. He couldn't get through a shot process, and as a result, he'd had enough. So the decision that we made with him when he came home was, let's take and go from shooting right-handed to shooting left-handed. And I hear a lot of people, I see a lot of people on some of the forums out there talking about that. I did it, my son did it, and I have two very good friends who had target panic so bad that they were willing to try anything. And that's what we tried with them. And I'm here to tell you that it was a huge success in the physical side of learning to shoot the bow again. The mental aspect, maybe they fight with the demons a little bit, but it's nothing like it was. I mean, they had all kinds of issues, like I did, shooting the bow. And when I say I tried everything, I went through the clicker. My son went through the clicker. I even did the blank bail for 6 months. I came down to the basement for 6 months, didn't shoot any more than 5 feet from the target, trying to groove it in. And here's what happened. I grooved it in. I grooved it in pretty good in the basement. I grooved it in pretty good outside in the backyard shooting at targets. I even grooved it in going stump shooting with a buddy that I knew. I was comfortable. But here's where the big, huge disconnect came. One day, I grabbed my wife and I grabbed my son. We went out in the backyard. I put a paper plate on the target. I went back at 20 yards and said, I need to shoot these 3 arrows into that target at 20 yards with complete control. I really thought that I had this thing beat. End of story is I missed the paper plate all 3 times. Embarrassing. Are you kidding me? I can't draw the bow back to an anchor point, aim, and shoot an arrow? Seriously? That's where I was at. I thought about it constantly. I was in a state of frustration all the time. I could not go to a 3D shoot and shoot 1 good arrow. I could go to a 3D shoot and hit the target. And don't misunderstand me. I could still shoot a bow. I was still killing, deer every year without problems, but I wasn't shooting them the way that I wanted to shoot them. And that way was to come back into an anchor, aim that arrow, and shoot that deer. I was more along the lines of a snap shooter that didn't have a whole lot of control. So, I wasn't shooting the arrow the way that I wanted to shoot the arrow. That was my frustration. So one day, back to my son, because this is the same way that I did this, is we put a plan in action of how we were going to conquer this. And the way we were both going to conquer this is we were going to switch sides. And I know the importance of having your dominant eye over top of the arrow. But I'm here to tell you that it doesn't have to be that way. And for me, it was more important that I shoot a quality arrow with good form than try to shoot an arrow left-handed with target panic. Okay, so here's the plan that my son and I put in place. We bought a very lightweight bow. I forget what the poundage was. I want to say it was 25 pounds. And we stayed at 5 yards for the target for 3 to 4 weeks with 25 pounds. A little bit boring, but what we did is we learned a shot process. And we learned it really well because we had complete control of the bow. A month later, we talked to friends, we asked around, and we found a bow that was 5 pounds heavier. Not 10, 5 pounds heavier. And we went back at it again for another month, learning the shot process, complete control of the shot process. After that month, we asked around and we found a bow that was another 5 pounds heavier. And what we were doing is we were working up into a bow that we felt would be enough poundage and still maintaining the control to hunt white-tailed deer, because that's pretty much the biggest animal that we shoot around here. I'm not a big elk hunter. I've been elk hunting, but we don't have elk in our backyard, so it's just not something that I'm that focused on. So where we worked up to was in the bows in the 45-pound range that we were very comfortable with. He was a little younger. He was a little stronger. He could work up a few pounds more than that and still have complete control of the bow. But, on a side note, I need you to understand something, that you can shoot a 40-pound bow with perfect form and it will outperform a 50-pound bow shot incorrectly every single time. With today's new modern materials, carbon limbs, carbon arrows, skinny arrows, we can get really solid penetration on pretty much any game animal with a 45-pound bow shot properly. And that's what we're after. We're looking to shoot this bow properly. So that is the way that worked for me. I had to change sides. It worked for my son. It worked for a couple other good friends that they just fought the demons for, I mean, two of them. I want to say they probably had this issue for 25 years. And they got tired. They got fed up. They lost interest. And I asked them to trust me. I asked them, you know, try it. Give it a try, what my son and I did. It's going to work. And it's a little awkward in the beginning to go from left-handed to right-handed or from right-handed to left-handed because, you know, you don't have to be strong. You don't have to be super athletic. You just have to be committed to the process. You know, there is a way that each of you out there want to shoot an arrow. And by starting slow, over time, and slowly working your way up, always under complete control, you know, you'll be able to do that. You know, if at any point during that process you feel yourself losing control, I think you might just have went just a little bit too far in the poundage. And the most important thing is as you go into the summertime, as you go into the 3D shoots, you have to set a limit on yourself. You can't go to a 3D course and shoot, you know, 30 hours on the practice range, 2 hours at each target, you know, 30 targets, 60 hours, 100 hours in a day. You're going to work your way right back into the same problems that you had before. So when you get into this, if you choose to switch sides, be smart about it. You know, we all want to go out. We all want to have fun. We all want the camaraderie to keep going out and shooting. But we have to set, you know, some barriers. You know, kind of like when we're going through this process, if you feel that you're not going to shoot a perfect arrow, let down. You know, I always remind myself, and for those people that come up here and shoot, that just because we draw the arrow doesn't mean we have to shoot it. You know, that's the difference between a great shooter and just an average shooter. A great shooter is going to feel that the anchor point isn't right. I'm not lined up. I'm thinking about, you know, what I'm going to do that night or the date I'm going to go on, and you just lose focus. You got to let down. And the other thing you have to learn, and I learned this from my son, is we were at an archery shoot one time, and, you know, there's 30 targets, and on target 24, he drew back, he let down, he put his arrow in his quiver, and he said, I'm done for the day. He realized that he was starting to break down. And he drew the line in the sand and said, I'm done. So that's really something for you guys to consider. If you feel that, hey, it's March, I've got plenty of time to give Tim's, you know, direction a try. And I really want you to have an open mind for it. We all have to maintain an open mind through this whole traditional journey because there's so much to learn. There's so many people to learn from. And it's just fun. It's fun to know every aspect of traditional archery, the longbows, the recurves, the self bows. You know, there's just so much to learn and so much to gain through that journey. But keep this in mind. This is the physical way to conquer target panic. And again, John Wirt's going to be back in next week. I can't wait to hear what he brings to the table. It's going to be special. It's going to be nice spending time with him. And hopefully between this video and his video, it'll give you guys some encouragement if you're suffering from some of these problems, and maybe an avenue out. So thanks for checking in. Please click the like button if we discuss something here you really like. The comment sections are open. Feel free to reach out to me. with comments that you have or something you may want to see in the future. And we'll see you again next time when John Ward's on the stage. We appreciate it. Take care. Enjoy your journey. We'll talk.